Hello students, welcome to this lecture on the course Principles of Political Science. Today's lecture on political science and its subdisciplines. In lecture 4, we explored the significance and relevance of studying political science. In today's lecture, which is lecture 5, we take yet another natural step forward. If political science is such a rich and important discipline, it makes sense that over time it has grown and developed into distinct branches or subdisciplines, each with its own focus, methods, and concerns. Today's lecture is an overview of these subdisciplines. We will begin by understanding what a subdiscipline means and why political science is divided into branches. We will then study each major subdiscipline in detail: political theory, comparative politics, public administration, international relations, political sociology, and public policy and political economy. After covering these core branches, we will explore emerging areas that have entered the field in recent decades, including human rights, environmental politics, gender and politics, and of course, very relevant digital politics. We will then examine how all these subdisciplines are interconnected and how together they give us a complex, complete, and holistic understanding of the discipline. We will close by discussing the relevance of these subdisciplines in the contemporary world of governance, globalization, and policy making. Let us begin this important overview today. Before exploring individual branches of political science, let us understand what do we mean by a subdiscipline. A subdiscipline is a specialized area within a larger academic discipline that focuses on a particular set of questions, uses specific methods, and develops its own body of knowledge and theory. Think of political science as a large river, just as a large river has many tributaries, each flowing in a slightly different direction but contributing to the same body of water. Political science has many subdisciplines, each exploring a different dimension of political life, but all contributing to our overall understanding of politics. Why does a discipline divide into subdisciplines? As knowledge grows, any discipline becomes too large and complex for a single scholar to master entirely. Specialization allows scholars to go deeper into a particular area and develop more rigorous knowledge. At the same time, the subdiscipline remains connected. A student of public administration, for example, needs political theory to appreciate questions of legitimacy and accountability. A student of international relations needs public policy to analyze how foreign policy decisions are made. The subdisciplines of political science are therefore best understood not as separate sealed boxes, but as deeply interconnected dimensions of a rich and complex whole that together eliminate the full reality of political life. We earlier studied the scope of political science in lecture 3, how it expanded from a narrow focus on the state to a broad engagement with behavior, system, culture, and global affairs. This expansion of the scope is precisely what makes the division into subdisciplines necessary and natural. Political science is divided into subdisciplines for several important reasons. The first reason is intellectual complexity. The political world encompasses the internal workings of the government, relations between states, and the behavior of citizens, particularly the political behavior, making and implementation of policies, the philosophical foundations of political life, and the role of economics in politics. No single framework can adequately address all these dimensions simultaneously. The second reason is methodological diversity. Understanding political philosophy requires methods from the humanities, textual analysis, and normative reasonings. Understanding voting behavior requires social scientific methods like surveys, statistical analysis. Understanding foreign policy requires diplomatic history and strategic theories. Different political phenomena demand different methods of study. The third reason is practical relevance. Different subdisciplines have developed in response to specific practical needs. Understanding how government administer public programs, how states manage their international relations, how policies are designed and evaluated. Specialization thus serves both academic rigor and practical usefulness in the world. The first and most fundamental subdiscipline of political science is political theory. Political theory is concerned with the philosophical and normative foundations of political life. It asks the deepest and most enduring questions about politics, questions that cannot be answered by data or empirical research alone, because they are fundamentally questions about values, justice, rights, right ordering of society. Political theory explores concepts like liberty, equality, justice, rights, authority, legitimacy, democracy, and sovereignty, which cannot be understood just by data or empirical research, but they are value-laden concepts, normative concepts. They have a normative dimension also. It asks, what is the purpose of a state? What justifies political authority? What does it mean for a society to be just? These are questions that great thinkers have grappled, with for millennia, from Plato and Aristotle in ancient Greek to John Locke and Immanuel Kant in the Enlightenment to John Rawls and Amartya Sen in contemporary times. Political theory has both a classical dimension, the study of historical texts and thinkers, and a contemporary dimension, the engagement with current debates about justice, rights, gender, colonialism, and democracy. In the Indian context, political theory is particularly rich, encompassing B.R. Ambedkar's philosophy on caste and democracy, Mahatma Gandhi's thought on non-violence and Swaraj, and Jawaharlal Nehru's vision of secularism and democratic socialism, etc., etc. The second major sub-discipline is comparative politics, as the name suggests. Comparative politics involves the systematic comparison of political systems, institutions, processes, and behaviors across different countries and regions. The fundamental logic is that we can learn more about any political phenomena by comparing it with similar phenomena in other countries. To understand why Indian democracy has survived for more than 7 decades, despite enormous social complexity, we can compare India's experience with other large and diverse democracies such as United States, Brazil, South Africa, etc. Comparative politics also studies different types of political system, democratic, authoritarian regimes, hybrid regimes, and seeks to understand what factors cause political systems to take different forms and to succeed or fail. Key concepts include political institutions, electoral systems, party system, federalism, political culture, and regime change. Scholars like Arend Lepehart, who distinguish between majoritarian and consensus democracies, and Samuel Huntington, who analyzed global waves of democratization, have made path-breaking contributions to this subdiscipline. For Indian students, comparative politics is particularly valuable because it situates Indian political experience within a global framework, helping us understand both what is unique about India and what it shares with other political systems worldwide. The third major subdiscipline is public administration. While political theory asks fundamental questions about the principles of good governance, and comparative politics compared political systems across countries, public administration focuses on the practical side of governance, how governments implement their decisions, focuses on how the governments implement their decisions, manage public resources, and deliver services to citizens. Public administration is concerned with the structure and functioning of bureaucracies, relationship between elected officials and civil servants, management of public organizations, implementation of government policies, etc. In India, public administration is of enormous practical importance. India is one of the largest bureaucratic system in the world, with millions of civil servants working at national, state, and local level. The Indian administrative services it plays a central role in implementing policies across every sector: education, health, agriculture, infrastructure, and social welfare. Understanding how these systems work, its strength, its strengths, efficiencies, inefficiencies, cultures, and reforms needed. It is essential for serious engagement with Indian governance. Public administration also covers topics like administrative law, financial administration or financial management, public sector reforms, e-governance, which is so relevant in today's world, and delivery of public services. Scholars like Woodrow Wilson, who first articulated the modern concept of public administration, and Paul Appleby, who contributed significantly to Indian administrative theory after independence, have shaped this important subdiscipline. The fourth major subdiscipline is international relations, abbreviated as IR. International relations is concerned with the study of relations between states and other actors in the international system, including international organizations, multinational corporations, non-governmental organizations, and non-state actors like terrorist organizations and global social movements. While earlier subdisciplines are primarily concerned with the political life within the state, international relations focuses on what happens between and amongst the state at global level and amongst the global actors. IR encompasses several important areas. It examines the causes of war, conditions for peace. It studies diplomacy, the practice of managing relations between states through negotiations and treaties. It analyzes international organizations like United Nations, WTO, IMF, including regional bodies like SAARC, etc. It also studies international law, human rights, international human rights law, international human rights regimes, and global governance. Major theoretical frameworks in IR includes realism, which encompasses power and national interest; liberalism, which encompasses cooperation and international institutions; and constructivism, which emphasizes the role of ideas, norms, and identities in shaping international behavior. For India, IR is of vital importance. Understanding India's foreign policy, its strategic relationship with say China, Pakistan, United States, and its role in global governance, and also its role and stand in global forums like on climate change, trade, security, anti-terrorism, or war against terrorism. They all require the analytical tools of IR. The fifth major subdiscipline is political sociology. Political sociology occupies a fascinating position at the intersection of political science and sociology. It examines the social basis of political life, how social structures, cultural values, and social movements shape political behavior, political institutions, and political outcomes. Political sociology is built on the fundamental right insights, and political life cannot be understood in isolation from the social context in which it is embedded. Politics is not simply a matter of formal institutions and legal rules. It is deeply shaped by social inequalities, cultural values, and group identities that characterize any given society. In India, political sociology is of exceptional importance. India is a society marked by deep divisions of caste, class, religion, ethnicity, language, and gender, and many more. Understanding how these divisions shape Indian politics is one of the most important tasks of political science. How does caste influence voting behavior? How does caste shapes Indian politics? How does religious identity affect political mobilization? How does gender inequality translates into political exclusion? The pioneering work of scholars like Rajni Kothari, who analyze the relationship between relationship between caste and Indian politics, represent the best of subdiscipline. political sociology also studies social movements, civil society, political culture, the sociology of political parties, and the relationship between state and society in democratic and non-democratic political systems. The sixth major subdiscipline is public policy, is concerned with the entire cycle of government decision making, from the identification of social problems requiring government actions through the formulation and adoption of policies to address these problems to their implementation and evaluation. Public policy emerged prominently in the 20th century as governments took on increasingly complex responsibilities in economic management, social welfare, healthcare, education, and environmental protection. Public policy analysis examines several key questions. Who sets the policy agenda? Whose problems get defined as requiring government action? How are policy themselves formulated? How are policy alternatives formulated and evaluated? What political and organizational factors determine which options are adopted? How are policies implemented? Why do some well-designed policies fail in practice? In India, public policy is directly relevant to major national challenges. Consider the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, Manrega, which provides employment guarantees to rural households. Understanding how the policy was designed, how it is implemented across hundreds of thousands of villages, how its effectiveness varies across the states, and what reforms might improve its functioning requires public policy analysis. Scholars like Harold Laswell, who pioneered the policy science, and Charles Lindblom, who developed the theory of incrementalism in policy making, have laid the intellectual foundations of this important subdiscipline. The seventh major discipline is political economy. Political economy examines the relationship between political institutions and processes on one hand and economic structure and outcomes on the other. It recognizes that politics and economics are fundamentally inseparable, that political decisions shape economic outcomes, and that economic interests profoundly influence political behavior and institutions. Political economy has a long and distinguished intellectual history. Classical political economy, associated with thinkers like Adam Smith, David Ricardo, and Karl Marx, was concerned with understanding the political foundations and social consequences of capitalism. In the 20th century, political economy developed in two main directions. The first is international political economy, which examines how economic interdependence, trade, finance, and investment shape international relations. The second is comparative political economy, which examines how different political institutions, democracies versus authoritarian regimes, federal versus unitary system, produce different economic outcomes. In India, political economy directly helps us understand important questions. Why did India pursue a state-led development model after independence? What were the political forces behind the economic liberalization of 1991? Why does economic inequality persist in democratic system that formally guarantees equal rights to all citizens? These are fundamentally political economy questions requiring integrated analysis of political and economic forces simultaneously. In addition to the established subdisciplines, several important new areas have emerged within political science. The first emerging area is human rights. The field examines the right that all human beings are entitled to simply by virtue of their humanity, regardless of nationality, caste, religion, gender, or economic status. These rights include civil political rights, the right to life, freedom from torture, freedom of expression, and and many other civil rights like right to vote, as well as economic, social, and cultural rights like right to education, healthcare, livelihood, right to protect their own culture, script, etc., etc. The study of human rights in political science examines how these rights are defined in international law, how human rights treats and institutions operate, and what happens when the state violates citizens' rights. For India, human rights is particularly important. India's constitution contains extensive fundamental rights, and India is party to many international human rights treaties, yet serious challenges remain, including violation of Dalit rights, gender-based violence, etc., etc. National Human Rights Commission of India, established by the Human Rights Act of 1993, and represents an institutional response to these concerns. When the politics of human rights becomes a tool of diplomacy in international politics is also something very interesting as a subdiscipline that political science deals with. The second important emerging area is environmental politics, also called green politics or eco-politics. Environmental politics examines the relationship between human political systems and the natural environment. It is concerning with how it is concerned with how political institutions make decisions about natural resources use, ecosystem protection, pollution regulation, and response to global environmental challenges like climate change, biodiversity loss, and desertification. Environmental politics emerged as a distinct field in the 1970s as environmental problems like industrial pollution, desertification, deforestation, species extinctions became increasingly visible and pressing. The foundational insight is that environmental problems are fundamentally political problems arising from decisions about how to use shared natural resources and addressable only through political decisions or political actions at local, national, and global level. The Paris Agreement on Climate Change, adopted in 2015 by 196 countries, represent the most important arena of global environmental politics today. Understanding why states agree to international environmental commitments, why they sometimes fail to implement them, and what political obstacles obstruct effective climate action requires political science. In India, environmental politics is of growing importance. India faces severe environmental challenges: air and water pollution in cities, deforestation, groundwater depletion, and increasing vulnerability to climate-related disasters. Political science help us understand the policy processes, institutional arrangements, and political conflicts involved in addressing these urgent environmental challenges. The third important emerging area is gender and politics. This field examines how gender, the social construction of masculinity and femininity, shapes political life, and how political institutions and policies shape gender relations in society. It emerged primarily from feminist political theory, which demonstrated that political life has been structured in ways that privilege men and marginalize women. Gender and politics covers several important topics. It examines political representation. How many women are in politics or in political offices? What factors explain what factors explain variations in women's representation, and what difference women's presence in decision making bodies makes? It studies feminist political theory from Mary Wollstonecraft in the 18th century to contemporary scholars like Judith Butler. It analyzes how government policies affect men and women differently, and how policies can promote gender equality. In India, gender and politics is particularly important. Despite women's crucial role in India's independence movement, and the constitutional guarantee of equality, women remains significantly underrepresented in parliament, holding around 15% of Lok Sabha seats in recent years. The debate about the Women's Reservation Bill, which which proposes reserving one third of parliamentary seats for women, is a central issue of Indian gender politics, and political science is well placed to analyze. The fourth important emerging and a very contemporary area is digital politics. Digital politics is concerned with the impact of digital technology, the internet, social media platforms, big data, artificial intelligence, and digital communication tools on political processes, institutions, and behaviors. This field has emerged rapidly since early 2000s as digital technology transformed every aspect of political life, rather human life, including the political dimensions of human life. Digital politics examines several phenomena. It studies how political campaigns use digital tools, micro-targeting of voters, social media advertising, and data campaigns using digital tools. It examines how digital platforms shape public discourse, how algorithms determine what information citizens see, and how misinformation spreads. It studies digital activism, how citizens use digital tools to organize themselves and participate in political life. It also examines digital governance, how governments use technology to deliver services and exercise surveillance. In India, digital politics is of growing importance. India had over 820 million internet users as of 2023. So now the number must have increased much more, creating vast new arenas of political communication. Political parties, governments, and civil society organizations use digital tools extensively. At the same time, concerns about fake news, hate speech, and government surveillance have made digital regulation a central political issue, requiring careful analysis and thoughtful policy responses from both scholars and policymakers who must navigate this rapidly evolving landscape. One of the most important intellectual lessons of today's lecture is that the subdiscipline of political science are deeply interconnected, and a complete understanding of any political phenomena requires drawing on insights from multiple subdisciplines. Consider the challenge of designing an effective poverty alleviation program in India. Political theory tells us about the normative foundations. What does justice requires in terms of the state's obligation to its poorest citizens? Comparative politics shows us how other countries have addressed similar challenges and what lessons India can learn. Public administration tells us how government bureaucracies can effectively deliver programs to millions of poor citizens across a vast and diverse country. Public policy tells us how policy agendas are set, how alternatives are formulated, and why some policies succeed while others fail. Political economy tells us about the political incentives shaping government spending decisions. Political sociology tells us about the social divisions, caste, class, gender, etc., that determine who benefits from government programs. International relations tell us about the role of international development organizations in shaping India's poverty reduction strategies. No single subdivision alone could provide a complete picture. Together, they illuminate the full complexity of the challenge, of the challenge or the issue. Let us continue exploring interconnections with other illustrations. India's response to global climate change, environmental politics, identifies the nature of the climate change, the scientific and political dimensions, international negotiations, and political obstacles to effective action. International relations provide framework for understanding India's participation in global climate negotiations, the dynamics of the Paris Agreement, and India's position on global on carbon emissions. Political economy analyzes the economic dimension of climate policy, the cost of transitioning to the renewable energy, the political interest of fossil fuel industries, and trade-offs between growth and environmental sustainability. Public policy tells us how climate policies are designed, adopted, and implemented. What regulatory frameworks, financial incentives, and institutional managements are needed, and what institutional arrangements are needed. Political sociology highlights the social justice dimension of climate change, how environmental burdens fall disproportionately on poor and marginalized communities, including tribal peoples, coastal fishing communities, and farmers in drought-prone areas. Political theory provides normative frameworks, questions of intergenerational justice, obligations to future generations, and the rights of those most vulnerable to climate impacts. Once again, no single discipline can provide a complete picture. Each contributes an essential dimension to understanding a complex political reality, demonstrating that these subdisciplines are most powerful when they work together rather than in isolation. And that is why we are moving towards a transdisciplinary studies era. The study of political sciences subdisciplines taken together provides what we might call a holistic understanding of political life. Holistic understanding means seeing the whole picture, not just one aspect of politics, but all its different dimensions, and understanding how they interact and shape each other. This perspective is one of the most valuable features of a political science education. It prevents the tunnel vision that results from excessive specialization, the tendency to see every political problem through only one lens. A scholar who studies only political theory may understand the philosophical foundations of democracy but know little about how democratic institutions function in practice. A scholar who studies only public administration may understand the mechanics of bureaucracy but not appreciate deeper questions of legitimacy, that gives governance its moral foundation. So political science education encompassing multiple subdisciplines gives students the intellectual breadth and flexibility to understand political reality in its full complexity, making them better scholars, better professionals, and better democratic citizens. The subdiscipline of political science have direct and practical relevance to the major governance challenges of the contemporary world. Consider how different subdisciplines contribute to addressing real challenges in India. Public administration is directly relevant to improving the quality and efficacy of public services, from digitalizing land records and simplifying business registration through e-governance initiatives to reforming civil services through better training and accountability mechanisms. Public policy is essential for designing effective responses to India's pressing social challenges of poverty, malnutrition, unemployment, healthcare access, and education quality. IR is critical for managing India's complex strategic environment, its relationship with its neighbors and major global powers, etc. Political theory provides normative foundation for evaluating government policies, asking not only whether they are effective but whether they are just and whether they respect citizens' rights. The subdiscipline of political science is also, directly relevant to understanding the challenges of an increasingly globalized world. Globalization, the intensification of economic, political, cultural, and technological connections across the national borders has transformed political life profoundly. International relations helps us understand the dynamics of a multipolar world in which rising powers like China, India, Brazil, Japan join traditional powers. It analyzes institutions of global governance from UN Security Council to many more, which are there to address global challenges more effectively. Political economy helps us understand the politics of international trade and finance, why some countries benefit more from globalization than others, and how international economic institutions shape domestic policy choice. The same goes with environmental politics that addresses climate change, the most urgent global challenge, providing framework for understanding international negotiations and obstacles to effective environmental governance. Similarly, human rights examines how international human rights norms are created, enforced, and championed globally, and what role human rights regime play, what role India can play in advocacy Lastly, digital politics examines how the internet and social media is reshaping global political communications and create new arenas of geopolitical competition. Together, these subdisciplines equip us to understand and engage with the complex global political environment we all now inhabit. We have now completed lecture 5. Let us consolidate the key ideas. We began by connecting today's lecture to lecture 4, showing the importance of political science, how it leads naturally to its specialization into subdiscipline. We understood what a subdiscipline is and why political science has developed distinctive branches as its scope expanded just from the study of state and government to behavioral revolution, to the study of institutions, governance, public policies, IR, etc., etc. We studied each of the seven major subdisciplines. Political theory, which provides the philosophical and normative foundation of political life. Comparative politics, enabling learning through cross-country comparison of political system. Public administration focuses on how governments implement decisions and deliver services. IR examines relations between state and global actors. Political sociology studies the social foundations of political life, including caste, class, gender, religion, ethnicity, etc. Public policy examines the full cycle of government decision making. Political economy analyzes relationship between political institutions and economic structures. We then explored 4 emerging areas: human rights, environmental politics, gender and politics, and digital politics. Through concrete examples, we demonstrated how all subdisciplines are interconnected and together provide a holistic understanding of political life. Thank you.